Bonnie, you on with us?
Yeah, nice to be with you. Thanks for
Okay,
having me.
thanks for being with us. I saw you on PBS when you were discussing the congresswoman who got shot there from that nutcase in where was it? Arizona?
This is in Arizona, but probably nutcase isn't the best language to use.
Okay. But you can let your hair down here and giggle a little bit because that was pretty stiff over on PBS. We're gonna try to lighten it up a little bit over here, okay? Can you bear with me?
Got it.
So Bonnie, I'm seeing social media. I'm being served ads in Nebraska of police officers participating in the electric slide. In New York City, I'm seeing a bigwig, a top brass there in the NYPD doing a kneel down in Washington Square. I saw a video that went viral in Flint, Michigan, of the sheriff who made a statement and marched with his constituency. And I've seen imagery of police officers taking a knee in Miami-Dade, Florida. Is this a style of policing to diffuse tense situations? Is this emotion driven? Do you think these officers are doing? Is this something that you train them to do, or do you just not know?
Sure. So I wouldn't be able to speak for the individual officers or the departments themselves,
Yeah.
but what I hope it would be, what I would have faith that it be, is that officers are trying to show respect for and common ground with a community that has been very wronged for a very long time by law enforcement. And my hope here is that these are first steps towards some type of a reconciliation and significant change for the way that we see law enforcement and policing in this country.
Now, these changes, we all know that if we could just rat out, if a good cop could just rat out a bad cop, it seems like all is said and done. But there's laws, there's rules, there are due process rights that protect all working people, whether they're armed with the weapon of the rake or armed with the weapon of lethal force. All workers are due their due process. The person who murdered George Floyd, is he a cop or what's his story? I mean, is he someone that should have had the job to begin with, or is this someone who just slipped through the cracks?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I think it's important for us to kind of take a step back and understand what today is in these conversations. So, today is the first memorial service for Mr. Floyd. And it's taking place right now as we're talking together.
Mm-hmm.
Today, it's the first hearing for the men who hunted and murdered Mr. Aubrey. And tomorrow would have been Miss Taylor's 27th birthday. So, it's really important to understand where we are in time and the weight that we're carrying here. And so, for me, the question isn't about good cops or bad cops. The question is about, do you believe in the system? And do you believe that the system was created to do what it was designed to do? Do you think that it's doing just fine? Or do you think that we should change it? Because, the officers who did what they did to Mr. Floyd, who murdered Mr. Aubrey, Miss Taylor, and the countless many others that we have to carry with us every day, it's not about giving them individual attention. They're going to get a lot of undivided attention from a judge and jury. And so what we can focus on instead are these large systems of change, as opposed to one bad officer or another. It's really about, do we like the way these policing systems are working, or do we want to take a moment in time and hear these communities and change what we're doing in order to actually serve and protect?
Now, Bonnie, I had an activist, a teacher from Minneapolis on the show last week, and she was telling me, she shared her opinion, and her opinion is not wrong. It's her opinion that it doesn't matter how many women or minority police officers you have. She was under the impression that all law enforcement was evil, and I can't blame her for feeling that way, especially right now. Her witnessing her kids in a very divided Minneapolis. According to her, Minneapolis is very segregated. Which departments do a better job of community policing than others? Can you tell me that, or do you need more research and data to back that up?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it kind of depends on who you ask. And so, taking a look at, the data around Minneapolis, I'm not surprised to hear that was her perspective. I'm saddened to
Yeah.
hear that that was her perspective. You know, if you look at Minneapolis, you know, Black people are 19% of the population and they're 9% of the police force, but they're 58% of the Black population in Minneapolis are subject to police force.
Mm.
And so, you know, if you look at, you know, nearly 60% of the time, you know, excessive force or use of force is being put toward people of color. And that's the city's own figures. That's not my fun math. That's the city of Minneapolis has put forth that data. And so, you know, I think it's always very easy to say, let's look at another good department. Let's look at another good story. And I have many of them. But that's such an easy privilege to have. And I would just strongly recommend that we sit in this uncomfort. We hear this woman about not feeling that any law enforcement is there to protect her. And if you look at the data, perhaps she's right. And that's what we can focus on. Are there good law enforcement officers out there and good programs? Absolutely. I know them personally, and I love to elevate them as much as I can. But I think it's important that we try to not take away from the story by adding, you know, pieces of sugar on top. I think it's very important that we just focus on this grief, because these communities have only focused on this grief for generations, and we owe it to them to focus with them. And then another time I can talk to you about really cool law enforcement programs that are happening across the country.
We're talking about change, coast to coast here. We want change. Change this, change that. Even Aaron Rodgers from the Green Bay Packers put out a tweet today saying we need to amend and just either amend or rescind laws that protect systemic racism. Can you give our audience just a quick example of a change that could happen in Minneapolis, in Georgia, that could, you know, bring some clarity to this awful situation?
Absolutely. You can immediately ban the use of chokeholds. You can do that right now.
Milk and coffee. Who would have thought?
Absolutely within power. Yeah, exactly right.
Right?
That's actually on
banning chokeholds.
We're not going to do that.
Yeah.
You can do that.
Yeah.
We've chosen to not. We've chosen to not do that. And, you know, we've chosen to fund law enforcement agencies millions and millions of dollars over. So, for example, if you were paying attention to Los Angeles yesterday, the LA mayor defunded $4 million from the LAPD.
Yeah, that's happening here in New York too, Bonnie. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
They're saying that.
Those are things that can change. I know that, you know, you look at unions a lot, and I know that you're really invested in unions. Unions, especially police unions, are a horse of a different color. They're very different from a teachers union.
Yes.
Whereas, you know, people who are committing murder like this, they're still getting paid.
Yeah, and I was talking to.
What do you mean?
Yeah, and Bonnie, I was talking to friends of mine in law enforcement unions, and you know, the other tools that an electrician might have is a plier or a screwdriver. Another person might have a truck or a rake. They have the power and the tool of a firearm armed with lethal force. That is you're right, a different horse, a different animal. Even today, 50A is a policy, I guess, Brian, right?
Yeah, it's a law in New York to protect personal records.
And you know, that I think is a whole other conversation in the future. The Atlantic, Bonnie, I'm sorry we didn't go over this with you yesterday. The Atlantic did some research and shown that arming local police with military gear, right, changes the mentality of the average rank and file cop, prompting them to be more aggressive, and it undermines community policing and basically eradicates public trust. So if we eliminate chokeholds, can we eliminate them having military style weapons? Would that help or not?
My question is, what are they for? You know, why are we doing this? How did we get so far so fast? You know, you don't need those types of weapons. I mean, what we're talking about here, this militarization, is against peaceful protesters. Why do you need an Uzi?
Yeah.
To come and talk to me? I mean, we're talking about me. We're talking about my friends and colleagues that are out in the street risking coronavirus, to say that this is enough and to say that we're not doing this. And you want to have an Uzi? Like, that just doesn't seem to, I don't think I'm that much of a threat. I mean, you've met me. I don't think I'm that terrifying. And so
you're actually very beautiful. But anyway,
it's just Thank you. It's just completely unnecessary. I look just like my mother. I'll tell her you said so.
Well, you know, the weapons that they used in Nebraska, Bonnie, were the electric slide, a dance move. In New York City, the guy had a conversation and did a kneel. In Flint, the guy had a conversation and he marched. I mean, that was their weapon. You know, and police officers, their job is to get screamed at all goddamn day. All goddamn day. And I don't know. I don't like the imagery that I'm seeing.
So I think that that's a paradigm shift, right? So I would hope that that's not what their job is.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think that, you know, that perception leads to really serious implications, right? Of Black Americans being 2 times more likely than white Americans to be shot by officers.
All right.
You know, I think that that's what we keep coming back to. And this militarization is only going to increase. And again, like, you're mobilizing against me. You know, I'm not really seeing it. What are you so afraid of? What are you so fearful of a group of silent protesters saying you shouldn't be murdering my brothers and sisters in the street as they cling and cry for life?
Yeah. Bonnie, I want to thank you for your time and your sense of reason. And I hope to have you on again, maybe in a few more shows to talk about these issues in more depth, okay? Thank you for your time. And thanks for calling in.
It would be an honor. Thank you.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Thanks so much. Take care.
All right, take care.